We want to live in such a way that Christ is seen as a treasure. Christ is seen as attractive to unbelievers. What does it mean then is it primarily an external thing? People will observe my peace or my marriage or the smile on my face or in some circles, the things I do and don't do, the places I go and don't go. Is it primarily a disposition of the heart kind of thing? Or is it an external thing? And then does it cross a line at some point where you may like what God has done for me and this is all true, but there's all of this sin and repentance stuff that has to be talked about as well. Maybe Matt, would you take that, just you're in that suburban context, very religious group?
Yeah, I think you want to, in your preaching and teaching, and I'll roll it back here, because what we're trying to do at the Village is stop some of the cycle. And so one of the first things we wanted to address at the Village was children's ministry. How are we going to teach our children? How are we going to teach them Jesus? How are we going to teach them the gospel? How are we going to... Because what we found is that the bulk of religious people who we were baptizing, who were coming to know Christ, had to convert. Were offended that we would question. And in fact, there were people who left. I remember one man in particularly that came and sat down with me and just said, I'm leaving because I don't... I feel good before I come here, and then I don't know when I leave. So I'm going. And well, I mean, he's in a great place to go, never have that happen again. Dallas, all over the place. But what we were finding is conversion experience that looked like this. Little Timmy, do you want to come to heaven with mommy and daddy? Or do you want to burn in hell? What do you want to do, Timmy? Okay, let's go. Let's go up front. And so for us, I mean, to combat it, we're going, let's start early. Let's start early. And so we teach doctrine to our children. I've got my little 5-year-old by the way, I think she's just doing it because she doesn't want to go to bed at night. But when I try to put her to bed at night, on the way out of the room, she'll ask me, tell me about Jesus and the cross, or tell me about the Trinity. The Trinity is bothering my 5-year-old, which is a great deal. It's bothering me too, right? But I'm going, hey, what Ann, what Carl, what Matt, what those guys are writing, what they're teaching our children. I've got my 5-year-old asking me about the triune God. Not hearing, oh, God hates liars. Don't be a liar. These are the character issues that God enjoys. And so I think right out of the gate, we're trying to combat that cycle by really addressing children's ministry, preschool ministry in a profoundly doctrinal way, so that, here's how I've taught it out loud to our people. My daughter, about the age of 2, fell in love with pink. All things pink. So here's how we talk about God. How good, how beautiful, how right is God that he gave us pink. Right? So that's a different way to... Anything my daughter enjoys, I want to trace back the authorship to Christ. Anything my son revels in, I want to trace back the authorship to Christ. Anything as the creator of all things. So what I'm trying to do early on is not point to God's disappointment in our failures, but in his deep love for us and giving us such things to communicate his love, his grace, his mercy, so that God, for my 3-year-old daughter at the time, was the God of pink. And then he's the God of candy. And he's the God of dress-ups. And he's the God of, we took our kids to China. He's the God of, we just continually want to instill the joy of who he is in them by very early communicating. Look at what he did. Look at what he did. And so I know that's a roundabout response to that question, but we haven't mentioned that part of all of this yet. Sure. And in regards to evangelizing what's next and instilling the joy of Christ in what's next. And so primarily, yes, there's front lines, but in regards to breaking the cycle and wanting the joy of Christ to be, that's what I want, that's my pursuit, that's what I'm after, that's the goal, that's the... we want to instill that very early on into our children, and then, in preaching and teaching, it's what we do.
So, God gives pink, God gives candy, God's the giver of every good and perfect gift.
Sure.
And then, where do you stir in, and you don't deserve any of this, and the only reason you get it is because, and early do you want her to receive that?
Yeah,
And how do you tell?
sure. I want to constantly talk about two things in our home, over everything, over meal, over daddy-daughter time, on date night, at bedtime. I want there to be two constant themes: goodness, grace, and mercy, and our wickedness. And so where God gives me the chance to point out her wickedness, I want to point it out and then point right back to the God of pink. And where, so I think it's the same conversation. I think it's got to be the same conversation. But it was my experience, especially early on in talking that first 2 years with guys, that God had become a policeman. That was it. He was just the divine policeman who saw all that they were doing wrong and loved them, but saw, there was no grandeur, glory, might, power. Just, I've failed in all these areas, so that you got back to religion. You got back to, let me try to earn his favor. Let me try to earn his favor. So in small ways, the God of pink is, look at the grandeur, look at the might, look at the glory of God, and then look at you. Look at how unbelievable he is to you. Look at how unbelievable he is to mommy and daddy. Look how gracious he is in that you know our home. You know our... And this is one of the things I try to teach our staff. We're all young. We all have to... I apologize to my children constantly. This is daddy's wickedness. This is God still working on daddy's heart. Even big things. Even, I think that there might be a little too much television in our house. So then let's gather up. I failed you. This is daddy's wickedness. This is daddy's need of grace. This is daddy. And so to me, it's the same message. It's the same message. The goodness and might and beauty of Christ. Our wickedness.
So I think where the rubber meets the road is when you get to that point and the question arises, so I want pink and everything good and I don't deserve it, and you're telling me the solution is Christ and the gospel, how do I get it? And that conversation is going to happen pretty early.
Sure.
And how do you not bring a 3, 4, 5-year-old to premature profession of faith?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer your question. I pray a lot.
Yeah.
I pray a lot. And then I tell you where I've benefited so far is that my daughter, for whatever reason, probably to have me on my knees much more often, is just born a skeptic. Just born we were reading her a little book about the Trinity that gave an illustration about, it was a really horrible illustration, but gave a little illustration. She, immediately found the flaw in it. She's like, that's not true. What? It's not true. I play by myself all the time. I play by myself happily all the time. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, the author's an idiot, boo. And there are a lot of morons out there, and we're going to have to watch out for them. So I think that he's protecting me right now because my daughter's a skeptic. And she's not going to, oh, Daddy believes this, let's go. Because she'll, even now, there have been times my wife and I, almost with a little panic look at ourselves, look at each other across the dinner table because of something she shot back. Or because, hey, boo, do you want to pray? No, I don't. You, go ahead, Daddy. So, I don't know. So far, what you're saying has not been true because there's no premature decision of faith. She's still probing it for weaknesses. So,
that's an advertisement for Children Desiring God Conference in April.
There we go.
Those are not easy questions.
No.
I've raised 5 kids up into professions of faith, and I can describe how we did it, but I don't have great confidence that we as a church have got that one figured out so that we don't raise up a generation of nominal Christians.